All right, Unit 9.1, Totalitarianism in the Soviet Union or the USSR. I might slip up and call it Russia a couple times, but you know what I'm talking about. So, where we left off, Vladimir Lenin had come in. He had set up the first communist nation after the Bolshevik Revolution. A reminder of his philosophy. Some of it aligned with Marx, some of it pure Lenin, or a break from Marx. So, first, Lenin thinks imperialism is awful. He thinks imperialism is the highest form of capitalism. Therefore, if you were thinking like of that dialectic, Hegel's dialectic that Marx had used, that then if you had to have the antithesis, like the antithesis would be imperialism, and then communism must come after that, because imperialism is like at that point where capitalism would break. So he believes this is the worst form of capitalism because the conquered peoples are ruthlessly exploited, and of course, Marxist communists wouldn't want the exploitation of the people, especially the working people. So imperialism's out. He sees the development of a new type of party. We've talked about this, a cadre of the educated or a small group of elites that would be the professional revolutionaries to serve the development of the political class. And so he believes that it only takes a small group of elites, different than Marx. Marx would say that it was the workers of the world unite. Um, like Marx, however, Lenin saw a worldwide communist movement. He may not have said that it'd be run by all of the workers in the world equally, but he does believe that communism should spread worldwide. In 1919, the Comintern will come back together for the third time. And its purpose was to serve as a preliminary step of the International Republic of Soviets towards the worldwide victory of communism. So in this time period where we talk about the Red Scare, it really wasn't so unfounded. Their mission statement was to spread communism worldwide in this time. Just a reminder as well, another use of communism was war communism. It was used by the Reds to win the Bolshevik Revolution. Or the Russian Civil War in 1918 to 1920. It was the first mass communist society in world history, and is really just the complete control or central planning of the economy. Socialization or nationalization of all means of production are included in this, as well as all, like I said, all planning. In reality, the Bolsheviks destroyed, however, the economy because mass starvation and crop failures are going to happen. If you have capitalism, we have the invisible hand to drive supply and demand. So you generally end up with enough food, if not more, because you want to make a profit. But there's no guide really in communism for how much you need to make. And the farmers aren't getting paid for any extra work. So they're not working as hard to produce extra surplus. So mass starvation, crop failures, we have a decrease in industrial output. Obviously, people aren't going to be happy with that mass starvation and kind of central planning. And so, to alleviate or to silence those protesters, the secret police or checkup will liquidate, which means to kill, about 250,000 opponents. This is kind of the pre-KGB. They come before, but they will liquidate about 250 or kill opponents to this war communism or communism in general. So there will be rebellions. Just like I said, there are problems. There are people who do not want this communism within the country. This rebellion, actually headed by the Navy or mutiny, is going to be previously actually pro-Bolshevik sailors until like this mass starvation and problems come in. They're going to march at Kronstadt Naval Base and will have to be crushed with machine gun fire. So we will see Lenin turn machine guns on his own navy. This is a major cause. Lenin realizes pretty quickly here that there's some serious problems that are causing unhappiness, and he wants to prevent any further mutiny, especially because his own navy. I mean, you don't want to think about other parts of your army rising up against you. And this will cause him to institute the NEP. You need to, on page 5, circle star, put a box around the NEP, the new economic policy. This has been on every AP exam in some way, whether it be a multiple choice question or incorporated into an FRQ or a DBQ. You need to know the NEP, and they just love to go for it. So, Lenin's NEP, or New Economic Policy, 1921 to 1928, its purpose is to eliminate the harsh aspects of war communism. So, as we just talked about, war communism had caused some problems. It was pretty harsh. This is Lenin's response to the peasant revolts, the military mutiny, or the naval mutiny, and economic ruin that's going on at this time. He is actually, for our first communist leader, going to allow some capitalist measures in. Lenin would call this necessary step backwards. You see, like 3 steps forward, 1 step backwards. This is, he would say, a necessary step backwards. We need to get better. We need to heal ourselves, and then we will put all of this communism stuff back in. So he said the government would not seize surplus grain. Peasantry could then sell that grain on the open market, which equals a profit. It equals more food because the farmers are willing to work harder because they're making money. It's an incentive. We'll also see that small manufacturers will be allowed to run their own businesses, therefore getting to make some money, therefore giving them incentive. See the picture here? Government was still in control, however, of big things like heavy industry, banks, and railroads. But the results of the NEP or the Russian economy will improve. Industry and agricultural output will be back to pre-World War I levels. Workers will have shorter hours, better conditions, so we're going to start to alleviate mutiny there, and temporary relaxing of terror and censorship. So it does its job in relieving some of those tensions that were worrying Lenin as far as mutiny went. Let's talk about Lenin's overall impact on Russian society. Under Lenin, Russia will be renamed a Soviet Union in 1920, or the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or the USSR. Today, all of these Soviet Socialist republics are separate again, Belarus, etc. Old social structures will be abolished, such as titles for nobility will be ended, loss of influence for the Greek Orthodox Church. Women will gain equality in theory, if you consider like divorce equality. We'll see, some improvement there. Russians had greater expectation of freedom than they had during the Tsar's regime, although expectations were going to be really, really crushed by Stalin. Spoiler alert, we'll get there in just a minute, because Mr. Lenin is going to die in 1924. So, Lenin dies 1924. You can kind of see him in a wheelchair here towards the end. Is going to die, and then his body will actually be preserved, although I don't think it was at Lenin's request that it was preserved, not like Bentham, who had requested to preserve his body. But it is still there. If you make it to the Red Square, you can go down in a little room and visit there. So it was preserved by people who wanted him to be a symbol of communism moving forward. He did leave no successor, however. So this is going to cause a power struggle that's going to ensue between Stalin, who I just mentioned above, and Leon Trotsky, who had been like kind of the right-hand man of the Red Army under Stalin. And so kind of talking about their platforms and how one will come to power, let's take a look at Stalin first. So Stalin, as you can see in your notes, was a realist and believed in socialism in one country. He believe not that we shouldn't spread it, but we should wait to spread it. We need to perfect it in our country first. We are already having problems. We can't take on the whole world right now. So let's do socialism perfect in one country, and then it can't do anything but spread to the rest of the world. First, Russia had to be strong internally, and then could later take its efforts to an international communist revolution. He sought the establishment of a socialist economy without the aid of the West, so not needing to bring those individuals in to improve Russia or USSR. He did have a different last name, very long, can't pronounce it, never have been able to, but his name changed to Stalin, actually means Man of Steel, and there's a really wonderful movie about Stalin called Stalin, Man of Steel. If you ever get a chance to watch it, maybe we can throw it in that last week when we're completely done. But really awesome, one of the best movies, especially about Stalin, that I've seen. But next, Trotsky. So Leon Trotsky, as you can see over here standing to the right, had been like the sidekick or the right-hand man of Stalin. He led the Red Army during the Bolshevik Revolution. He was more the Marxist ideologue and believed in permanent revolution, continuation of a world communist revolution. So he is much more idealistic, where Stalin was more realistic. In that Trotsky was like Lenin would have wanted us to continue, to take this worldwide. Party leaders believed Trotsky was too idealistic for their taste with his worldwide communism, and didn't think that Russia could survive if they didn't turn their attention inward. So we're going to see that, as you'll see later, the Central Committee and the Politburo are going to move their support behind Trotsky, and Trotsky will take control in 1927. And if you go ahead and turn the page, take total control by 1929. Stalin, however, was a very paranoid individual, which we'll talk about multiple times towards the end of this. And he is going to see Trotsky as this thorn in his side, who's the one person that might be able to say this isn't what Lenin would have wanted. And I was there for all of this, and I'm an old schooler, and I know how all this went down. That's Trotsky. So he will have him exiled. In Mexico City, Trotsky, unfortunately, is writing some propaganda about Stalin. Maybe not so much propaganda, like truthful, like this is what Lenin would have wanted. I was there, I would know. Pamphlets about Stalin and circulating them, and then Trotsky will be assassinated by Stalin's agents in Mexico City in 1940. There's one story that it was an ice pick like you chip like ice for a drink with, and then there's another story that it was an ice pick like you go up a ravine with. Like, I'm more inclined to go for ice pick for drink, like drinking a drink on the beach, rather than why are you carrying a mountain ice pick around. But either way, he's dead, he's assassinated. And so let's turn our attention to the Soviet Union under Stalin's total control. So continuing with that paranoia and fury, the entire Politburo from Lenin's time that had ruled under Lenin will eventually be purged, leaving Stalin in absolute control. He really doesn't want anyone who could stand up and say that Stalin isn't doing what's right and get any kind of pushback towards him going. So he is going to continue there, and then he is also going to end Lenin's NEP plan and replace it with his top-down order, or 5-year plans. So Stalin's 5-year plans are really what he called revolutions from above, which just means top-down. The orders come from the top to down. This is his first 5-year plan. He had, like, after this 5 years is our goal for the next 5 years, but we'll address this first 5-year plan of 1928, and as I said, marked the end of Lenin's NEP. Objectives of Stalin's 5-year plans are: we are behind and we need to catch up. That is his goal. We are behind, we need to catch up. Underneath this, ways we're going to get there, objectives to get there, he wanted to increase industrial output by 250%, steel by 300%, and agriculture by 150%. He wanted 20% of peasants to give up their private plots and join collective farms. And he said, we are 50 or 100 years behind the advanced countries. We must make good this distance in 10 years. Either we do it or we shall go under. So kind of some prophetic with World War II coming around the corner words. Results. So these are his goals, but what did he actually get accomplished with his first 5-year plan? His results, if you see there, steel actually went up 400%. The USSR then became the second largest steel producer in Europe. Oil production went up 300%. Finally, we'll see some urbanization in the USSR or Russia. 25 million people will move to cities. Yet, the quality of goods was substandard. I think they went a little too quick. They skipped some steps. They were just in a hurry to get things done. And the standard of living did not rise, so we did not see improvements there. And then that moves us into our greatest cost of all, or what would say was Stalin's maybe biggest failure, would be collectivization. So, what did Stalin want to do next? He wanted to bring the peasantry under absolute control of the communist state. How does he do that? He has to take away any freedoms or land that they were given. If you remember, they were just given this, like, they have barely been, like, 50 years, had anything. And he's wanting to take it away now. Use of machines in farm production to free more people to work in industry. So he wants to bring machines in, take the farmers out, and move people to the city. He gave government control of production and extend socialism to the countryside. This is going to result in the consolidation of individual peasant farms that they had just been given into large state-controlled enterprises and take away the peasants' freedom. Farmers would be paid according to the amount of work they did. So a portion of their harvest was taken by the government. Eventually, the state was assured of grain for urban workers who were more important politically to Stalin than peasants. Might want to circle that there. He is taking the grain from the people growing it, and from the countryside, from peasants, and appropriating it towards the city. So, with the supply, if there's going all in one place, that leaves a large part of the population starving, and we'll talk about that. Collective farmers first had to meet grain quotas before feeding themselves, and so if the grain quotas went up for the city people and that's all you had, and it went there. So let's talk results. So this was significantly opposed by farmers as it placed them in a bound situation just like they'd come out of the Mears. And if you remember the kulaks, which were kind of like our bourgeoisie of peasants that had been given land, were offered the greatest resistance to collectivization because they were like, no, I just got this. You are not taking it away. And so Stalin, seeing their resistance, is going to order the party's workers to liquidate or kill the kulaks as a class for the greater good. So you can see that this is rallied like city workers who are like, yeah, life's gotten better for us. You kulaks are like, we can see the future. This is the way. He actually has other citizens kill the kulaks. 10 million peasants will die due to collectivization. So a huge number. Jaw should be dropping there. But also, 7 million of that is from that forced starvation of forcing the food out to the city workers and like starving out pretty much the peasantry and the farmers. And also, where this grain is going, he's starting to sell it for gold to buy industrial stuff. So the countryside becomes very less important to Stalin compared to his city, his workers, his industrial fields. Agricultural output then will be no greater than in 1913 due to all of this, and by 1933, 60% of peasant families were on collective farms, 93% by 1938. So, government under Stalin. So, we've been talking about Stalin and the Communist Party, but how was the government really structured under him? Well, you would have the Central Committee, which was the apex of Soviet power. It was about 70 people in the 1930s, so elites there that would be. And then out of that, about a dozen members would dominate discussions of policy and personnel. So this is 12 individuals in the Politburo who would then be the top advisors to Stalin. And then there is the title of General Secretary, which Stalin created, and this is the highest position of power, and also the leader of the Soviet Union, so the place that he would take. So Central Committee, 70 of the elite, 12 of those elite that are high advisors, and then our leader or totalitarian, Stalin, who's the General Secretary. And so how does Stalin stay in power? And not only stay in power, but the people love him. 10 million people dead, but people love him, and that is due to Stalin's propaganda campaign. So the purpose, of course, of his propaganda would be to glorify work to the Soviet people and encourage worker productivity to keep people on this track. He will use technology for propaganda, which is one of the things we talked about that made totalitarianism able to happen when it didn't happen with conservative authoritarian or absolutism. So newspapers like the Pravda will spread this propaganda that translates to mean the truth. This is a Stalin newspaper. We'll also see films and radio broadcasts to emphasize socialist achievements and capitalist plots, so even propaganda against the enemy. We'll see that Sergei Eisenstein, 1898 to 1914, will be the quintessential or ideal patriotic filmmaker under Stalin. He is going to put Stalin in places he never was, and by that I mean he was there at the Bolshevik Revolution. He was not. Trotsky was there, not Stalin, so he's going to make him look like this hero that he's not. Writers and artists will be expected to glorify Stalin in the state, and their work will be closely monitored. Like if you got out of line, you might go missing. Religion will be persecuted under Stalin because he hoped to turn churches into museums of atheism, because as communism is atheist, so is Stalin. But there is one group of people that may have benefited, that would have rallied around Stalin maybe even without all of this propaganda, and that is the workers. So no surprise, Communist Party workers. we're going to see that in the cities, probably the individuals were a little more happy. You could almost go along with this propaganda without too much convincing. We'll see old age pensions, free medical services, free education, daycare centers for children. Education will become key to improving one's position, such as specialized skills and technical education, which is a little off point from the actual like Marxist communist um, agenda that education for all and all to their education, but it will be it's key. They want you to be educated to help the system. Many Russians saw themselves building the world's first socialist society while capitalism crumbled during the Great Depression. So they're watching and like, look at us rise while the capitalist nations are falling apart. Germany, United States during the Great Depression in the 1930s. And it's at this point that the USSR will attract many disillusioned Westerners, disillusioned to capital, like, everything's crazy bad, to communism in the 1930s, which also promotes like the fear and people being finger pointed for being red. But like if you went to Russia in this time to like see, Stalin's taking you like the 10 best places. He wasn't taking you to all like to collectivization and like persuading people to go there. But there will be some people disillusioned that go. As far as women go, maybe not so far behind the workers in support, but the Russian Revolution immediately proclaimed complete equality of rights for women. Like I said before, it's really just in divorce and abortion, although a couple things will be added here. Women were urged by the state to work outside the home, mainly out of necessity, and being workers, and liberate themselves sexually. Took some odd forms, but anyway, many women worked as professionals in universities, but however, on the flip side of this, you were still expected to do all of the at-home chores and take care of the children, even have a job. Men continued to monopolize the best jobs. Rapid change and economic hardship led to many broken families, so not a benefit there. And then how did Stalin keep everyone who didn't want to be part of this, the people that are not workers and the people that are not women, involved in this system? Is going to be just like in the French Revolution, except instead of the Reign of Terror, we're going to see the Great Terror. So Stalin's Great Terror is going to be first directed against peasants after 1929, and then terror will be increasingly used on actual leading communists, so on his own group. Stalin, that paranoia thing, is actually afraid that the old guard or the old Bolsheviks will accuse him of going against Lenin's plans and try to usurp or mutiny, whatever. He would then go after powerful administrators and ordinary people, often for no apparent reason. The Great Terror would result in 8 million arrests, and then they have show trials, which are not real trials. Like, we're going to make it look like you had a trial, and then you're going to disappear to a work farm, or you're going to be killed. Late 1930s, dozens of old Bolsheviks that old guard I was talking to you about had been Lenin's closest followers, were tried and executed. I mean, this is so paranoid, he stays up all night making lists of people to kill. So, I mean, there's kind of some same paranoia we saw in the Reign of Terror. Purges, 40,000 army officers will be expelled or liquidated. He starts to say who was to be the next people that could turn on me. He saw Navy turn on him once. We're not going to have that happen again. So he expels this. This is going to be a problem, though, because you've just gotten rid of all of your military leaders and officers and trained personnel right before World War II. And so we'll see some inexperienced military groups with no leaders going into that, so not a benefit. And also millions of citizens were killed or died in gulags, which are forced labor camps, work camps, where they work you to death, or simply disappeared. You can use your imagination there. There is a book called Gulag Archipelago, if you'd like to take a look at that, with what the gulags contained. Like, an archipelago is a group of islands, so this gentleman who survived Gulag said that you could like step from one gulag to the next. And so that's a little extra information if you're interested in that topic. And that will lead us into your Fascist Italy video, which is the next part of your homework for Thursday.